My husband died, and my daughter inherited the house and $6 million. I was left with an old, rundown cabin. Then she kicked me out of the house, shouting, "Go live with the pigs, you poor old woman." Days later, what I found in the cabin left her in shock. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end, and comment where you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Joyce, and I'm 56 years old. For 30 years, I thought I knew my family. I believed love and loyalty meant something, until the day my husband died, and I realized how wrong I had been. The will was read in the office of Mr. Morrison, an older lawyer whose glasses kept sliding down his nose as he read the papers. I sat on a worn leather chair, hands clasped in my lap, trying to stay calm. My daughter Amanda was beside me, wearing an expensive black suit I didn't remember seeing her wear before. She sat stiffly, waiting. "All right," Mr. Morrison began, clearing his throat. "I will now read the last wishes of Robert Matthews." My heart was pounding. Robert and I had been married for 25 years. We had built a life together, a house, a future. I naturally assumed everything would be shared fairly, or that most of it would go to me, since Amanda already had a successful career as a lawyer. "To my dear wife Joyce," Morrison read, and I straightened in my chair. "I leave the cabin on Pine Creek Road, along with everything inside it." I frowned. The cabin was old and falling apart, something Robert had inherited from his father years ago. We had never done anything with it because it needed too much work. "To my beloved daughter Amanda," Morrison continued, "I leave the family home on Maple Street, all bank accounts, investments, and a total of $6 million. The world seemed to stop. $6 million. The house where I had lived for 25 years, everything Robert and I had built together. Amanda had received it all, and I got a crumbling cabin. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Amanda turned to me, smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No mistake, Mom. Dad knew exactly what he was doing." Mr. Morrison looked at me with something like pity. "The terms are very clear, Mrs. Matthews. Your husband was very specific about his wishes." We left the office in silence. The April sun felt too bright, almost cruel. On the drive home, Amanda didn't say a word, but I could feel her satisfaction radiating from her like heat from an oven. That night, as I was making dinner like I had for decades, Amanda finally spoke. "Mom, we need to talk about living arrangements." I put the knife down on the cutting board. "What arrangements?" "Well, this is my house now, and frankly, I think it's time you had your own space." I stared at her, hoping she was joking. "Amanda, this has been my home for 25 years. This is where I built my life with your father." "Dad isn't here anymore," she said coldly. "And this house is mine. You have the cabin now." "The cabin doesn't have electricity, Amanda. Or running water. The roof is falling apart." She shrugged, as if my problems didn't matter. "Then you'll have to fix it," I said. "No. Look, I don't want this to get unpleasant. I'm giving you 1 week to pack your things." I felt like I'd been slapped. 1 week. 1 week, she repeated, then added with a cold smile. "Think of this as a chance for independence, Mom. You always said you wanted more time for yourself." The next few days were a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I packed my personal belongings, family photos, and the clothes that fit into 2 suitcases. Amanda watched everything like a hawk, making sure I didn't take anything she considered valuable. "But that's not fair," I said when I tried to take the porcelain set my mother had given me. That came with the house. It was my mother's, Amanda, and now it's part of my inheritance. On the last day, as I loaded my suitcases into my old Honda, Amanda came out of the house. She was wearing a new designer dress and jewelry I didn't recognize. "I hope you understand this isn't personal, Mom," she said, but her tone said otherwise. "Your father obviously had his reasons for doing this," she added. "And what do you think those reasons were?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Amanda came up to me, and for a moment, I thought maybe she would finally show some compassion. Instead, her face hardened. "Maybe because you were always a burden, always depending on him, never really contributing. Maybe he wanted to make sure someone like you, who never did anything with your life, got what you deserved. Her words hit me like bullets. Amanda, I gave up my career to raise you. I left my job to be a stay-at-home mom because you and your father wanted it that way. No one made you do anything, Mom. Those were your choices, she said coldly. I got into my car, hands shaking. Amanda stayed at the doorway, watching me drive away from the only home I had known as an adult. When I arrived at the cabin, the sun was setting. The building looked worse than I remembered. Paint was peeling, windows were broken, and the porch steps wobbled dangerously. But it was all I had. That first night, lying on the floor over an old blanket, staring at the stars through a hole in the roof, I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not just for losing my home, but for losing the daughter I thought I knew. How had it come to this? How had the little girl I raised and loved unconditionally turned into someone so cruel? But as the tears dried on my cheeks and the quiet forest surrounded me, a small spark lit in my chest. It wasn't anger, at least not yet, it was determination. If Amanda thought I would give up if she thought she could break me, she was very wrong. I had no idea what awaited me in that old, seemingly useless cabin. I had no idea my life was about to change forever. The first days in the cabin were the hardest of my life. Without electricity, I had to rely on candles and an old flashlight I found in a dusty drawer. Without running water, I had to walk half a mile to a working well, carrying buckets that felt heavier each day. My hands, used to the comforts of suburban life, became blistered and cut. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional pain. On the third day, my dear sister called me. Her voice sounded strange, distant. Joyce, is what Amanda says true? What does she say? I asked, even though a part of me already knew. She says you attacked the lawyer when the will was read, that you screamed and caused a scene because they didn't give you all the money. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Linda, that's completely false. I never. She also says you've been harassing her, demanding money, threatening to hire a lawyer to contest the will. That's a lie, I said, my voice breaking. Linda, I'm your sister.
You know me better than that.
There was a long, painful silence. I don't know what to think, Joyce. Amanda seemed really upset when she called me. She said she was afraid of you. After hanging up, I sat on the rotting wooden floor of the cabin and cried until I had no tears left. Amanda hadn't just taken my home, she was systematically destroying all my other relationships too. The next day, my sister-in-law Margaret canceled our Friday lunch tradition. I think it's best if you take some time for yourself, Joyce, to reflect on things. Then it was my cousin Sarah, who had been like a sister to me. Amanda says you've been drinking a lot since Robert died. Maybe you should get some help. Every phone call felt like a knife in my chest. Amanda had carefully built a story where I was the villain, the greedy, desperate widow who couldn't accept that her own husband didn't trust her with his fortune. A week after moving into the cabin, Amanda showed up at my door. She arrived in a brand new, bright red BMW, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my car. Hi, Mom, she said with a fake smile. I came to see how you're adjusting. I looked at her through the torn screen door, trying to process her presence. What do you want, Amanda? Can a daughter check on her mother? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Wow, this place is really a mess, isn't it? Look at those broken windows, and that roof. Oh my, are you really living here? I don't have a choice, I said. Well, I guess you'll have to make it work. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. You know, Mom, I've been talking to the family about you. My stomach sank. What have you been telling them? I asked. Just the truth. That you've been bitter since the will was read, that you can't accept Dad's decisions, and that you've been saying very unpleasant things about me, Amanda. That's not true, and you know it, I said. She shrugged. Perception is reality, Mom. And the perception is that you're not handling your grief well. Then she turned and started walking back to her car, but stopped and looked over her shoulder. Oh, and Mom, Linda mentioned that you might try to contest the will. Just so you know, Dad worked with the best lawyer in the state. Everything is legally airtight. If you try anything, you'll just lose the little money you have. After she left, I stood at that broken door for a long time, watching her car disappear down the dirt path. The reality of my situation hit me like an avalanche. I hadn't just lost my home and my family. Amanda had been systematically destroying my reputation too. That night, as I tried to fix one of the broken windows with tape and cardboard, I thought about the last 25 years. Had I really been such a bad mother, such a bad wife? I remembered when Amanda was 8 and got pneumonia. I spent 3 nights at the hospital, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, holding her hand. I remembered every school play I attended, every science project I helped with, all the nights I stayed up waiting for her to get home as a teenager. I remembered when Robert lost his job in 1998, and I went back to work as a secretary to keep the family afloat. I remembered leaving that job when he found a better one because he said it was important that someone be home for Amanda. Had any of that meant anything to him?
To Amanda?
Apparently not. 2 weeks after moving in, my closest neighbor, Mr. Henderson, came to visit. He was an older man who had known Robert for years. "Joyce," he said, taking off his hat, "I'm so sorry about Robert, and even more sorry for what you're going through." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I've lived here for 40 years, he continued, "and I know the value of this land. Your husband was a smart man, very smart." At the time, I didn't understand exactly what he meant, but his words stuck with me. By the end of my 2nd month in the cabin, I had lost 15 pounds. My hands were rough and calloused. My hair had lost its shine, and new lines appeared around my eyes. But there was something else. A toughness had grown in me. One morning, while sweeping debris from the porch, I found a strange key partially buried under some loose floorboards. It was unlike any key I had ever seen, heavy, with an intricate design. I held it up in the sunlight, turning it between my fingers. What door could this key open? In a cabin, I thought I knew every corner of. I had discovered something completely new. That night, as the candles flickered around me and the forest creaked outside, I studied the key more closely. It had tiny engraved symbols I couldn't decipher, and something inside me told me it wasn't an ordinary key. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair or sadness. I felt curiosity. And beneath that curiosity was something even more dangerous. Hope. I didn't know then that this small bronze key was going to change everything. I didn't know that my life in exile was about to turn into something completely different, something that would give Amanda a surprise she never saw coming. The key obsessed me for days. I carried it in my pocket while doing daily survival tasks, gathering firewood, fetching water, trying to patch the leaky roof. Every night, by candlelight, I studied it, trying to figure out its purpose. The engraved symbols looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I had seen them before. They were small and delicate, as if made by a skilled craftsman. The key itself was heavy, made of a metal that didn't seem like ordinary bronze. On the 4th day after finding it, I decided to search the cabin more carefully. For months, I had been too busy surviving to really explore. Now, motivated by the key, I started looking for any lock, hidden compartment, or secret space it might fit. I began in the basement, a damp, cobweb-filled place I had avoided until now. Armed with my flashlight and renewed determination, I crept down the wooden stairs, which creaked ominously under my weight. The basement was larger than I expected, stretching under the whole cabin. The walls were rough stone, and the floor was packed dirt. In one corner was a pile of old, dusty boxes. On another wall, rusty tools hung from hooks. Then I saw it, a small metal door built into the far wall, almost hidden behind an old shelf. My heart raced as I approached. The door had a small, ornate lock with the same engraved symbols I had seen on the key. With trembling hands, I pulled the key from my pocket and inserted it into the lock. It fit perfectly. The mechanism turned with a soft click. Despite the years it had probably been closed, the door opened, revealing a small space, like a safe built into the wall. Inside, there was a thick manila envelope and a smaller metal box. I picked them up carefully and climbed the stairs, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Once upstairs, under the best light I could find, I opened the envelope first. It contained legal documents I didn't understand at first, property deeds, topographic maps, and papers with official state seals. But as I read more closely, using a magnifying glass I found in a drawer, I began to realize what I was holding. They were mineral rights, the rights to mine the land where the cabin sat, not just the small plot I could see, but 200 acres stretching into the hills. My breath caught as I read the papers. According to documents dating back to the 1920s, Robert's family had owned the mineral rights to this land for generations. But more importantly, there was a recent geological report, dated just 2 years before Robert died. The report showed significant deposits of high-quality quartz and possible veins of semi-precious stones. But what left me speechless was the last page, an offer to buy the mining rights from a mining company. The offer had been made 6 months before Robert died, but a handwritten note in the margin showed that he had rejected it. "I will wait for the right moment," he had written in his familiar handwriting. With hands shaking violently, I opened the smaller metal box. Inside was a sealed letter with my name written in Robert's hand. "My dear Joyce," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means you have found what I left for you. I hope Amanda hasn't been too cruel, but knowing her nature, she probably was." I had to stop reading to wipe away the tears that were falling on the paper. "You may be wondering why I did things this way," the letter continued. "Why I gave the house and the money to Amanda while leaving you this cabin that seems worthless. The answer is simple. I know you, Joyce. I know your strength, your resilience, your ability to survive and thrive even in the hardest circumstances. Amanda never had to fight for anything. We gave her everything on a silver platter, and I'm afraid it turned her into someone I don't recognize, greedy, manipulative, with no real compassion for others. If I had left everything to you directly, she would have found a way to take it, legally or illegally." My breathing was uneven as I continued reading. "But you, my love, you have something Amanda will never have, true inner strength. I knew that if anyone could survive in that cabin long enough to find this treasure, it would be you. Consider it a final test, one Amanda would never have passed. The mineral rights to this property are worth far more than the house and money I left Amanda, but more importantly, they are your freedom, your independence, your chance to live the rest of your life on your own terms, without depending on anyone. There are more documents in the bank safe, in a safety deposit box registered under your name. The box number is on the back of this letter. Use it wisely. I loved you all our years together, Joyce. I'm sorry I put you through this test, but I knew you were strong enough to pass. Now live for the both of us." At the end of the letter was a number, 247. I sat on the cabin floor for a long time, reading and rereading the letter. Robert had orchestrated everything. The will that seemed so cruel, so unfair, had actually been his way of protecting me from Amanda while giving me something she could never touch. But there was something more in his words that stirred both love and pain. He knew me well enough to know I could survive this test, but he also knew Amanda well enough to know she would betray me. How long had he known our daughter was capable of such cruelty? When I saw the person Amanda had become that night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel hopeless, abandoned, or betrayed. I felt something I had forgotten how to feel. Powerful. Amanda thought she had destroyed me. She thought she had won, that she had finally gotten rid of the mother she saw as a burden. But she had no idea what she had really inherited. She had no idea that her cruelty had been exactly the test Robert expected her to fail. The next day, I drove to the bank in town. Safety Deposit Box 247 contained even more documents, including updated geological reports and correspondence with 3 different mining companies, all interested in the extraction rights. The most recent offer, dated a week before Robert died, was for $7 million. As I drove back to the cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about Amanda, probably in the house that used to be mine, spending the money she thought was her big victory. She had no idea that her mother, the woman she had treated like garbage, had just become a millionaire. But it wasn't time for the big reveal yet. First, I had to decide exactly how I wanted to use this new power. One thing was certain. Amanda had seriously underestimated the woman she had raised. The next few days were a whirlwind of quiet research. I decided not to act impulsively. Robert had been meticulous in his planning, and I would be just as careful in executing it. First, I contacted a different lawyer, one from a neighboring town who didn't know Amanda. Mr. Peterson was an older man, an expert in mineral rights and land transactions. When I showed him the documents, his eyes lit up with professional interest. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, adjusting his glasses to look at the papers more closely, "this is extraordinary. Your husband had impeccable documentation here. These mineral rights are legitimate and completely separate from any other inheritance." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means that even though your daughter inherited the house and money, these mineral rights are entirely yours. They are specifically in your name and cannot be challenged or claimed by anyone else." I felt a wave of relief. "And the offers from mining companies?" I asked. Peterson smiled. "Very legitimate. In fact, I know two of these companies. They have excellent reputations. But, Mrs. Matthews, before you make any decisions, I recommend getting an independent geological evaluation. The prices of semi-precious stones have risen significantly in recent years." Following his advice, I hired an independent geologist to assess the property. Dr. Martin Reeves was a man in his 50s with a gray beard and eyes that sparkled with excitement whenever he talked about rocks and minerals. For 3 days, I watched him walk around my property with strange equipment, taking samples and making measurements. I kept up my daily routine, keeping up the appearance of the abandoned woman struggling to survive in a rundown cabin. Meanwhile, I started watching Amanda more closely. It wasn't hard to get information about her in a small town. People talk, especially at the post office and the grocery store. What I heard surprised me, though maybe it shouldn't have. That Amanda Matthews is spending money like it will never run out, Mrs. Gonzalez whispered in the grocery line. "She's bought 3 big-ticket things just this past month. And that trip to Europe she's planning," added her friend. 2 months in the best hotels. "It must cost a fortune. My niece works at the jewelry store downtown," Mrs. Gonzalez continued. "She says Amanda has been there 4 times buying necklaces and bracelets that cost more than my annual salary." I listened with growing fascination. Amanda was doing exactly what Robert had predicted, wasting the money without a thought for the future. A week later, Dr. Rips gave me his report. His smile was even bigger than before. "Mrs. Matthews, your property is a literal treasure. The quartz deposits are large and high quality, but that's not even the most exciting part." "What else did you find?" I asked. "Amethyst. Lots of gem-quality amethyst. And something even better, green tourmaline. The specimens I found suggest significant deposits." I didn't know much about gemstones, but Dr. Reeves' expression told me this was big, very big. "What kind of value are we talking about?" I asked. "Conservatively, I'd say the mining rights could be worth between $10 and $15 million, maybe more if the tourmaline deposits are as extensive as I suspect." $15 million, 3 times what Amanda had inherited. And that was a conservative estimate. That night, as I ate my simple dinner by candlelight, I couldn't help smiling. Robert had known exactly what he was doing. He had turned my apparent humiliation into the greatest victory of my life. But my investigation didn't stop there. I started paying even closer attention to Amanda's activities, not out of spite, but out of strategic curiosity. One afternoon, while at the bank for some minor transactions, I overheard a very interesting conversation. Amanda was at the window next to mine, and her voice was loud enough that I couldn't help but listen. "I need to transfer another $50,000 to my investment account," Amanda was telling the teller. "And I also need information about loans against my inheritance. I have some big expenses coming up." Loans against her inheritance. That meant she was already spending more money than she actually had on hand. After she left, I waited a few minutes before approaching the same teller. He was young, probably new on the job, and looked a little overwhelmed. "Excuse me," I said in my most motherly voice, "but the woman who just left, is she Amanda Matthews? I think she might be related to me." "Oh, yes," he replied. "Mrs. Matthews has been very busy lately with all her transactions." "Transactions?" I asked. "Well, I shouldn't talk about other customers' business," he said, then leaned forward as if to share juicy gossip. But between you and me, I've never seen anyone spend money so fast. Big withdrawals almost every day. This was valuable information. Amanda wasn't just spending Robert's money, she was spending it at an unsustainable rate. A few nights later, while going over Robert's documents for the umpteenth time, I found something I had missed before, a small note written in the margin of one of the older geological reports. Amanda never had patience for things that really matter. She always wanted instant gratification. Joyce, on the other hand, understands the value of waiting for the right moment. Robert had understood our daughter better than I realized. He had seen her impulsive nature, her need to have everything immediately, and had used that weakness against her. The next day, I decided to take a short trip into town. I hadn't left the property in weeks except for essentials. But now I was curious to see how Amanda was handling her new wealth. I found her in the town's most expensive clothing store, trying on a coat that probably cost more than I had spent on clothes in the past 5 years. "How about this one?" she asked the saleswoman, turning in front of the mirror. "It's for my trip to Paris next month." "It looks beautiful on you, Mrs. Matthews," the saleswoman replied. "And we have shoes that match perfectly." From my spot behind a scarf display, I watched Amanda without being seen. Her behavior was telling. She shopped compulsively, picking the most expensive items without even asking the price. It was as if she was trying to fill a void, like money could fix something she didn't even realize was missing. When she left the store carrying 3 large bags, I followed at a safe distance. Her next stop was the travel agency, where she spent over an hour planning what looked like a very extravagant vacation. After that, she went to a real estate office. Through the window, I could see her looking at brochures for houses that were clearly out of her reach, even with her inheritance. It was fascinating and sad at the same time. Amanda was acting exactly like someone who had won the lottery and had no idea how to handle sudden wealth. She was making impulsive decisions that would lead her to financial ruin in just a few years. That night, back in my cabin, I did some simple calculations based on what I had seen and heard. Amanda was spending about $50,000 a month. At that rate, her $6 million would last less than 10 years, and that didn't even count the interest she was probably racking up on loans.
Robert had been right.
Amanda didn't have the discipline or wisdom to manage real wealth, but I did. As the candles flickered around me and the forest whispered outside, I made a decision. It was time to start turning my mineral rights into real money, but I would do it my way, on my terms at the perfect time. Amanda would get her surprise, but first, she would face her downfall. 6 months after moving to the cabin, my life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. I had sold the mineral rights to the most reliable mining company for $12 million after careful negotiations that also secured me future royalties. But I kept my life simple, at least on the outside. I still lived in the cabin, although now I had electricity and running water installed discreetly. From the outside, the place still looked run down just as Amanda expected, but inside I had made subtle yet significant improvements for my comfort. My lawyer, Mr. Peterson, had structured everything so the money was completely protected and diversified. I had enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, and then some. But more important than the money was the sense of control I had regained over my own life. Meanwhile, I had been watching Amanda's predictable decline. My sources in town had become more reliable as people started seeing me with sympathy, the poor older woman abandoned by her cruel daughter. What I heard was exactly what I had expected, but I was still surprised by the speed of Amanda's fall. She sold 2 of the 3 cars she bought, Mrs. Gonzalez told me during one of our casual meetings at the supermarket, and she canceled that Europe trip she had planned. "Really?" I asked, pretending to be surprised. "My sister-in-law works at the bank," Mrs. Gonzalez continued. "She says Amanda has been there almost every day trying to get more loans. Apparently, she already owes over $200,000. $200,000 in debt in just 6 months. Amanda's self-destruction was happening even faster than I had calculated. But what really confirmed that her world was falling apart was when I saw her at the pharmacy one Tuesday afternoon. She looked different. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was messy. Her clothes, though still expensive, were wrinkled. But the most revealing thing was her eyes. They had the desperate look of someone realizing the consequences of her actions. She was buying anxiety medication and sleeping pills, speaking softly but urgently with the pharmacist about whether her insurance would cover the cost. That night, as I had dinner in my now comfortable cabin, I got the call I had been waiting for. Mom. Amanda's voice sounded small, vulnerable, in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. Hello, Amanda. Mom, I need to talk to you.
Can I?
Can I come see you? I looked out the window at the dark forest, feeling a strange calm. Of course. When?
Now.
It's urgent. Okay. You know where to find me. An hour later, I heard the familiar sound of her car coming down the dirt path. But when I went out to the porch, it wasn't the bright red BMW anymore. It was an old sedan, probably 10 years old. Amanda got out slowly, as if every movement cost her effort. When she stepped into the porch light, I could see she had been crying. Mom, she began, her voice breaking. I've made terrible mistakes. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there watching her, remembering all the times she had come to me with problems when she was younger, and how those visits had completely stopped once she got married and decided she no longer needed me. Do you want to come in? I finally asked. She nodded, and I guided her inside the cabin. I had made tea, as if I somehow knew this conversation was coming. Amanda sat in the chair I had set out for guests, looking around like she was seeing the cabin for the first time. It's not as bad as I thought, she murmured. You've made some improvements. I've done what I could, I replied. She stayed silent for a long moment, twisting her hands in her lap. Finally, she looked up at me. Mom, I'm in trouble. Big trouble. What kind of trouble?
Money.
I owe a lot. More than I can pay. How much? $400,000. Her voice was barely a whisper. I thought I had more time. I thought Dad's money would last forever, but I made stupid investments. I bought. I spent without thinking. I looked at her. This woman who had once been my baby, my little girl, now someone I barely recognized. But now, sitting in my humble cabin, stripped of all her former arrogance, I could see a glimpse of the child she had once been. And what do you want me to do? I asked softly. I need your help, Mom. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was horrible to you, but you're the only family I have. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and for a moment, my heart softened. This was my daughter after all, the little girl I had raised, the one I had loved unconditionally, no matter how much pain she had caused me. Amanda, I said calmly, 6 months ago you told me to go live with the pigs. You called me an old poor woman, humiliated me in front of your late father, and kicked me out of the only home I had ever known. I know, Mom, I know. I'm so sorry, she whispered. You took my family photos, my clothes, even my mother's porcelain set. You said I never contributed to anything, that I was always a burden. Every word hit her like a slap. I could see it in her face, the way she shrank with each reminder of her cruelty. And now, I continued, you come here to this cabin you once thought beneath you, asking me for help. Tell me, Amanda, what's changed? Suddenly I'm a good mother, because you have money? I said sharply. No, Mom, it's not that. I've realized what I did. I've had time to think, to see how I treated the only person who always loved me unconditionally. Her words sounded sincere, and part of me wanted to believe her. But another part, the part that had suffered in silence for months, that had been humiliated and abandoned, remembered the pain all too well. Do you know what I've learned living here, Amanda? I asked. I've learned that I can survive without you. I've learned that I don't need anyone's approval to have worth. I've learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who least deserve it. Mom, please, I'll pay you back, she pleaded. When I fix my financial problems, I'll pay back everything I borrow from you with interest, Amanda said. With what money will you pay me back, Amanda? From what I've heard, you've spent almost your entire inheritance. What makes you think you can pay off $400,000 in debt? She went silent because we both knew she had no answer. I stood and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. For months, I had imagined this moment. I had pictured the day Amanda would come crawling back, asking me for help. In my fantasies, I had been hard, ruthless, giving her a taste of her own medicine. But now that she was actually here, broken and desperate, my feelings were more complicated than I had expected. Mom, her voice was pleading. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but if I don't get this money, I'll lose everything. The house, my law practice, everything. I turned to look at her. And why should I care about that, Amanda? When you had everything and I had nothing, did you care about my well-being? No, she whispered. And I hate myself for that. It was the moment of truth, the moment I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. I could be like Amanda had been to me, cruel, ruthless, without mercy. Or I could be the person Robert had seen in me, strong, but also capable of mercy when it was deserved. Amanda, I said finally, I'm going to make you an offer. Just one offer. Her eyes lit up with desperate hope. I will help with your debts, I continued, but not as a gift, as a loan, with very specific terms. Anything, Mom. I'll accept any terms, she said. I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. You haven't heard the terms yet. I sat down in front of Amanda, watching her wait, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. I had imagined this moment for months, and now that it was here, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. These are my terms, I began, my voice firm and clear. I will lend you $500,000 to cover your debts and give you a small margin to start over. Mom, that's more than I expected, she said. I raised a hand to silence her. I'm not finished. The loan will be at 5% annual interest to be repaid over 10 years. That's more generous than any bank. She nodded eagerly. I accept. Of course I accept. But there are more conditions, I said. For the next 5 years, you will work for me. You will come here every Saturday and help with property chores, cleaning, maintenance, whatever I need, without complaints, without excuses. I saw her face change slightly, but she nodded. Okay. And every time you come, you will speak to me with respect. No more rude or condescending comments like I got used to. You will treat me like the mother I've always been, not the burden you decided I was. Yes, Mom, she said. Finally, I stood and walked to my desk. I want you to write a letter, a full apology for everything you've done to me. Not for me, but for your own growth. And I want you to read it aloud to the whole family at the next Christmas gathering. Amanda turned pale. Mom, that's humiliating. Humiliating. I looked her straight in the eyes. Do you think it's humiliating to apologize for humiliating your own mother? For kicking me out of my home and spreading lies about me to the family? She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. No, you're right. I'll do it, she said. Good. Then we have a deal. The next day, she transferred the money to her account. Seeing her relief when she could pay off her debts gave me a strange satisfaction, not because I enjoyed helping her, but because I had complete control of the situation. The first Saturday she came to work, she showed up in jeans and an old t-shirt, something I hadn't seen her wear in years. Without her expensive clothes and arrogant attitude, she looked more like the daughter I remembered from decades ago. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice respectful for the first time in years. I need you to help clean the back shed. I'm reorganizing some things. We worked in silence for the first hour. I could see she struggled with the manual labor. Her soft hands were not used to hard work, but she didn't complain. Mom, she said at last as we moved some old boxes. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you get the money to lend me? I don't understand how you could save so much being, well, poor. I finished for her. She blushed.
I didn't mean it like that.
I smiled, but it wasn't cruel this time. Amanda, there are many things about me you never knew, many things you never bothered to ask. That afternoon, after she left, I sat on my newly fixed porch, drinking tea and looking at the forest that I now knew held my fortune. The trees whispered in the late breeze, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. The following months fell into a routine. Amanda came every Saturday, worked without complaining, and gradually we started having real conversations, not the shallow interactions of years past, but honest talks about life, mistakes, and what really mattered. One autumn Saturday, while we were raking leaves, she asked me a direct question. Will you ever really forgive me, Mom? I stopped and leaned on my rake. Amanda, forgiveness isn't something I give or hold like a prize. It happens naturally when I see real change. And have you seen it? Real change. I looked at her, this 40-year-old woman who had rediscovered humility in the hardest way. Yes, I've seen it. But more importantly, I think you've seen it too. She nodded, wiping a tear. I'm so ashamed of the person I was. Don't be ashamed of the past, Amanda. Use it to be better in the future. Christmas came, and with it, the first family gathering since my exile. Amanda had kept her promise and written a full letter, apologizing not just to me but to the whole family for the lies she had spread about me. When she read it aloud in my sister Linda's living room, with everyone present, the silence was complete. I could see tears in the eyes of relatives who had believed her stories and turned their backs on me. Mom, Amanda finished, looking directly at me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day I can earn it. After dinner, Linda came up to me, her eyes full of regret. Joyce, I can't believe we were so gullible. We should have known you better. People believe what they want to believe, I replied simply. But the important thing is that now they know the truth. That spring, exactly 1 year after finding the key in the cabin, I made an important decision. It was time to reveal my true situation, but I would do it my way. I bought a beautiful house in the hills overlooking the valley where I had grown up. It wasn't flashy, but it was elegant, comfortable, and completely mine. When Amanda came for her usual Saturday workday and found the cabin empty with a note directing her to my new address, she was completely shocked. Mom, she said when she arrived at my new home, what is all this? It's my home, I said simply. My real home. But how? The money I lent you, your financial situation? I smiled and invited her into the spacious kitchen where I had prepared tea. Amanda, do you remember the cabin you thought was worthless? Yes. Turns out your father knew something neither you nor I knew at first. That land had very valuable mineral rights, extremely valuable. I watched her process the information, her expression changing from confusion to understanding, and then to something I can only describe as awe mixed with respect. Are you saying Dad knew? Your father knew exactly what he was doing. He knew you would waste the cash, but that I would have the patience and wisdom to discover the real treasure he left me. Amanda stayed silent for a long time. Finally, she looked up at me. So, you never needed my money. You could have let me face the consequences of my actions. Yes, I could have. Why didn't I? I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Because despite everything that happened, you are still my daughter. And because I believed the person you used to be still existed somewhere inside you. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. I don't deserve this, Amanda said, maybe not very softly. But a mother's love isn't always about what someone deserves. That summer, Amanda finished paying back her loan 3 years early. She had rebuilt her law practice with a completely new focus, specializing in helping families in financial crisis. She said it was her way of giving back. Mom, she said one Saturday while we worked together in my new garden, do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad had divided everything fairly from the start? I thought about her question as I planted roses along the driveway. I think your father knew us better than we knew ourselves, I finally answered. He knew I needed to learn that I could survive on my own, and he knew you needed to learn that money without wisdom is useless. And do you think we learned? I looked at my daughter, not the cruel, arrogant woman she had been, but someone who had discovered humility and gratitude in the hardest way possible. I thought about my own journey, from the devastated woman who had been kicked out of her home to the independent, successful woman I was now. Yes, I said, smiling as the late afternoon sun bathed my garden in golden light. I think we finally learned. That night, sitting on my porch and looking at the lights of the valley below, I reflected on the extraordinary year I had lived. I had lost a family that had taken me for granted, but I had gained the respect of a daughter who had learned to value me. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Amanda. Mom, I just wanted to say goodnight and thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For seeing something in me that I couldn't see myself. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of the night, feeling more complete than I had in years. Robert had been right. I was stronger than anyone had thought, including myself. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't getting what you want, but realizing you already had everything you needed to be happy. Amen.